Right now, somewhere in West Africa, a country just did something so simple, so brilliant, that it broke the entire Western financial system. No banks, no dollars, no permission needed. Just gold, pure, physical gold, traded directly for thousands of tractors. And it worked. In months, starving farmland became productive. Food appeared on tables. A nation that was supposed to be crushed by sanctions instead became untouchable. But here's the terrifying part for Washington and Brussels. If other countries realize they don't need the dollar either, if Africa wakes up to what just happened, the global order doesn't just crack, it collapses. This is the trade deal that started a financial revolution, and the West is panicking. In January 2024, something unprecedented happened in West Africa. 3 countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, simultaneously announced their withdrawal from ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States. On the surface, it looked like a political exit. But underneath, it was the opening move in a financial chess game that threatens to destabilize decades of Western monetary control over an entire continent. But the story doesn't begin with ECOWAS. It begins with gold, lots of it. And what happened next would alarm the architects of global finance. When Captain Ibrahim Traoré took power in Burkina Faso in September 2022, his country was suffocating under a familiar African trap. Despite sitting on some of the continent's largest gold reserves, ranking as Africa's 4th largest gold producer, Burkina Faso remained impoverished. Billions of dollars worth of gold was being extracted annually. Foreign mining corporations walked away with the profits. Burkina Faso's government watched from the sidelines, powerless and broke. The gold was leaving the country in raw form, refined elsewhere, sold by others. Even the peasant farming on Burkina Faso's interior was failing. The country faced a food security crisis. This was not an accident. This was the design. For decades, Burkina Faso was trapped in a system inherited from colonialism and perpetuated by neo-colonialism. Its currency, the CFA franc, was pegged to the euro and controlled by a French-dominated central bank. To access international loans, the government had to grovel before the IMF and the World Bank, institutions owned and directed by the West. Any money the country earned from gold exports had to flow through Western banks. Any major economic decision had to be approved by ratings agencies in New York and London. The country was free in name only. Enter the blockade. In 2023, after Traoré's anti-Western rhetoric and his alliance with Russia became clear, Western powers tightened the screws. ECOWAS, working in coordination with the Western capitals, began imposing sanctions on Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. These weren't political slaps on the wrist. They were designed to cripple. The sanctions froze assets in regional central banks. They shut down commercial and financial transactions. They closed borders. Landlocked Burkina Faso suddenly couldn't access vital imports. The country's access to the regional financial market evaporated. For a developing nation dependent on imports for medicines, agricultural supplies, and fuel, these sanctions were existential threats. The message was clear: toe the Western line, or we will starve you into submission. This is where most African leaders capitulate. They negotiate. They compromise. They smile at conferences and quietly reverse their anti-Western positions. Traoré did something different. Instead of begging for sanctions relief, he looked at his country's actual wealth, the gold buried beneath its soil, and asked a question no one in the Western system wanted asked. Why do we need their banks? Why do we need their currency? Why can't we just trade what we have for what we need? What followed was a direct transaction that would send shockwaves through global finance. Burkina Faso took its physical gold reserves, the actual metal in government vaults, and used it as direct payment for agricultural machinery from Russia and other non-Western trading partners. No dollars, no euros, no international banks, no SWIFT system, no approval from ratings agencies, just gold for tractors, actual goods for actual resources. The oldest form of trade in human history, revived at precisely the moment when the modern financial system was weaponized against them. The implications hit Washington and Brussels like a hammer. This wasn't just a transaction. This was a proof of concept. For the first time, a country under severe Western financial pressure had successfully bypassed the entire dollar-based international monetary system. They had demonstrated that an African nation could fund its own development, secure its own food supply, and rebuild its agricultural capacity without permission from New York, without approval from London, without begging from Paris. Thousands of tractors arrived in Burkina Faso. Within months, barren land was transforming into productive farmland. Food production surged. The country that Western sanctions were designed to starve began feeding itself. National pride surged alongside the harvest. Traoré's government had delivered what the Western-aligned previous governments could not: economic sovereignty and food security. But here's what truly alarmed the architects of global finance. This model could spread. What if other resource-rich African nations looked at Burkina Faso and realized they didn't need the dollar either? What if they saw that gold, the metal under their feet, was more valuable and more honest than the fiat currencies they'd been forced to use? What if Nigeria, with its oil reserves, decided to trade directly with non-Western partners? What if South Africa, with its platinum and diamonds, realized it could fund its own development without IMF approval? What if an entire continent suddenly understood that the Western financial system was a tool of control, not a neutral mechanism of trade? This is the fear that keeps American and European policymakers awake at night. The dollar's global dominance doesn't rest on American economic strength alone. It rests on a system where every country that wants to participate in international trade must use dollars, must work through Western banks, must accept Western oversight. The petrodollar system, where Saudi Arabia and OPEC sell oil priced in dollars, was the backbone of this architecture. But if the Burkina Faso model scaled, if countries began trading resources directly without the dollar as intermediary, the entire system could unravel. Theoretically, it sounds simple. In practice, it's revolutionary. Russia understood this immediately. Moscow had been sanctioned, isolated, and excluded from Western financial systems after its invasion of Ukraine. It could no longer use SWIFT. Its assets were frozen in Western banks. It had every incentive to develop alternative trading relationships that bypassed the dollar entirely. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger were offering exactly that. Markets hungry for goods, sitting on immense natural wealth, willing to trade directly. The Sahel region of Africa suddenly became a geopolitical battleground, not over politics or ideology, but over the future of global finance itself. For decades, Western powers had taken African resources for granted. Colonial mining corporations extracted gold, diamonds, oil, and rare earth minerals, processed them elsewhere, and shipped finished goods back at inflated prices. The colonial relationship had simply evolved into a different form. The colonizers were gone, but the extraction continued. The system worked so smoothly that most people didn't even notice it was working. But Traoré noticed, and he wasn't alone. Across West Africa, a new generation of military-backed leaders began asking uncomfortable questions. Mali had already moved closer to Russia and China before Burkina Faso. Guinea was pivoting toward non-Western partners. Even in countries still aligned with the West, young people were waking up to the reality. Their countries were resource-rich but cash-poor because the system was designed to keep them that way. The gold for tractors deal was the moment when these frustrations crystallized into action. But the Western response was swift and instructive. International media outlets that had largely ignored Burkina Faso's structural poverty suddenly became very interested in the country's affairs. They published stories questioning the legitimacy of Traoré's government, focusing on military rule and democratic deficits. They highlighted security challenges, the terrorism plaguing the Sahel, and suggested that Traoré was incompetent to handle them. They questioned whether Russia was really helping or just exploiting Burkina Faso's desperation. These criticisms weren't necessarily false. Traoré's government is authoritarian. The Sahel does face genuine security challenges. Russia's motivations are not philanthropic, but the timing was revealing. Where was this international scrutiny when previous governments were overseeing economic stagnation and poverty? Where was the concern for democratic norms when Western-aligned leaders were making decisions that impoverished millions? The sudden intensity of international focus suggested that the problem wasn't Traoré's authoritarianism. The problem was his independence. This raises a crucial question. Is this a strategic move that will stabilize the region, or the start of a larger shift in how African nations view their relationship with the West? The answer matters more than most people realize. Because if Burkina Faso succeeds, if the Gold for Development model works, if food security improves, if economic growth accelerates, then the pressure on neighboring countries to follow suit will become immense. Not because of Russian propaganda or Chinese manipulation, but because results are the most powerful propaganda of all. Imagine if Burkina Faso's agricultural output doubles in the next 3 years. Imagine if rural poverty declines measurably. Imagine if young people who are fleeing to Europe or the Gulf see genuine opportunities at home. Other leaders will ask, why aren't we doing this? Why are we still begging the IMF? Why are we still trapped in this system? The Western response to this possibility is instructive. They cannot simply allow it to succeed. A successful Burkina Faso would undermine the entire premise of Western financial dominance, that the dollar system is inevitable, that Western institutions are indispensable, that there is no alternative. So the pressure is mounting. Diplomatic pressure, economic pressure, the threat of further isolation, the amplification of every problem and every criticism. The narrative that Traoré is a dictator, that Russia is manipulating him, that the whole experiment will collapse. Some of this may even be true. Authoritarianism is a genuine problem. Relying too heavily on any single partner, including Russia, creates vulnerability. The security situation in the Sahel is real and serious. But these truths exist alongside a larger truth. Burkina Faso's previous alignment with the West left it poor, dependent, and vulnerable to starvation when sanctions came. The new alignment at least offers the possibility of autonomy. Is trading one form of dependency for another really a failure? This is the complexity that documentary narratives often flatten. The Western press will tell you that Traoré is a disaster. Russian media will tell you he's a visionary. The truth is probably somewhere in between, a desperate leader making bold bets in a situation where every option carries serious risks. What makes this moment historically significant isn't that Traoré is a hero. It's that he's proven something that the Western system desperately needed kept hidden. That countries don't actually need the dollar. They don't actually need Western banks. They don't actually need permission from the IMF to trade with each other. The entire system rests on consensus and assumption. Once that consensus breaks, the system becomes fragile. And the consensus is breaking. You see it in Brazil and Argentina quietly moving away from dollar-denominated trade. You see it in China and Russia developing alternative payment systems. You see it in Saudi Arabia flirting with de-dollarization. And now you see it in Burkina Faso, taking the most direct path possible, gold for goods, without intermediaries. Each of these moves is individually manageable for the Western system, but collectively, they suggest a systemic shift that may be irreversible. Here's what happens next. Based on what we know about how power structures defend themselves, the West will increase its investment in Sahel instability, not deliberately, not as a stated policy, but through 1,000 small decisions. Support for opposition forces, amplification of security threats, diplomatic isolation, economic strangulation of countries that follow Burkina Faso's path. The goal will be to make the non-Western alignment so painful that countries choose the Western system by default, not because it's better, but because the alternative is unbearable. This is the logic of empire. When you can no longer convince people to accept your system, you make sure they can't afford to leave it. But empires have always underestimated the desperation of the poor. When you have nothing to lose, when your children are starving, when the system promises you nothing but continued extraction, then the risk of a radical alternative becomes acceptable. Then tractors from Russia seem more valuable than promises from the World Bank. The real question isn't whether Traoré's experiment will succeed in the narrow sense. It's whether the model will survive long enough to prove itself before Western pressure overwhelms it. And if it does survive, whether other African leaders will have the courage to follow. What happens next could redefine not just West Africa, but the entire global financial order. Because the dollar's dominance isn't backed by American military power alone, though that matters. It's backed by the belief that there is no alternative. Once that belief cracks, even a little bit, the entire system becomes vulnerable. Burkina Faso's gold for tractors deal is a tiny crack, but cracks tend to spread. The Western institutions that benefit from dollar dominance understand this. They see what's happening in the Sahel. They see the rising influence of Russia and China in Africa. They see the slow-motion collapse of their post-Cold War order. And they're responding with the only tools they know: sanctions, isolation, diplomatic pressure, and narrative control. But the deeper response they need: genuine development partnership that doesn't extract value from African countries, genuine respect for sovereignty, genuine belief that African nations deserve to control their own resources. This response would require them to fundamentally reimagine their relationship with the global South. And that's not happening, not voluntarily. So we're left with a deepening contradiction. The West claims to support African development and sovereignty, but it responds to African nations' genuine assertions of sovereignty with punishment. It celebrates democracy while punishing democratic leaders who make choices the West doesn't approve of. It preaches economic freedom while maintaining a global monetary system designed to prevent genuine African economic independence. These contradictions are becoming harder to hide. Burkina Faso's gold revolution exposes them with brutal clarity. Here's a country that tried the Western way, following IMF prescriptions, maintaining Western alliances, playing by the rules. The result was poverty and powerlessness. When it rejected that path and chose autonomy, it at least created the possibility of success. That possibility, more than anything else, is what terrifies the architects of global finance. In the coming years, we'll see whether Burkina Faso can sustain this path. We'll see whether Russia and China prove to be better partners than the West, or merely different exploiters. We'll see whether food production actually increases, or whether the experiment becomes a cautionary tale of nationalist overreach. But we'll also see something larger. We'll see whether the global financial order can sustain itself when countries stop believing in its inevitability. We'll see whether the dollar can remain dominant when alternatives are being actively developed. We'll see whether Western power can maintain itself through coercion alone, without consent. These are the questions that make Burkina Faso's gold revolution genuinely significant. Not because Traoré is a visionary or because Russia is benevolent, but because a country has chosen autonomy over integration into a system designed to impoverish it. And because that choice, replicated across an entire continent, could reshape the world. The gold is real. The tractors are real. The transformation of barren land into productive farms is real. Whether that transformation represents genuine liberation or a different form of dependency, that's a question history will answer. But for now, in this moment, Burkina Faso has done something the Western system said was impossible. It has broken free.